Hi, everyone. Just want to let y'all know that I just put in the chat. This is Fanny Yang here with R2R. We are so happy for everyone to be with us here. We'll be starting promptly at 9 a.m. EST, so please feel free, get settled in.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Good morning, how you doing? I'm doing well. Good morning. Are we leaving on some other folks from your end? No, I think this is it. Okay, gotcha, perfect, perfect. Um,
Hi, folks. We have one more minute, just letting more people join in with us. All right, so I believe it's 6 or 6 my time. But it's 9 a.m. for everyone else, and also some other folks as well. I think we have a pretty international crew today, so I'm looking forward to the conversation. So hi everyone, my name is Fanny Yang. I am one of the co-founders along with Beverly Golyekison of R2R, short for Recover to Restore. I'll be one of your moderators, facilitators today. So I'm very happy to see that we have a good crew of folks showing up. And then I will pass it on to my co-facilitator, Martins, for his little introduction.
Yeah, thank you very much, Fanny. I guess I need to stop sharing. 1 second.
I believe we already have the slide, the meeting rules slide up sharing. So if you could just share a little bit about yourself, and then we can get started.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Depending on where you are, good afternoon, good evening. Like Fanny mentioned, we have an international audience and crew. So things from Washington, D.C. metro area. My name is Martin Sobo, and I will be hosting this gathering today with Fanny, with Beverly on the background as the facilitator. So I would call on Beverly to introduce why we're here today, and then we take it back to Fanny. Thank you. Beverly, you're muted. Unmute yourself.
I'm sorry. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. It's good to have you all joining us today on this COP28. We look forward to you sharing as we move forward to meet our net zero commitments in our various local towns, communities, rural communities, and especially marginalized communities. Again, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to our discussions.
Thank you, Beverly. Fanny, over to you.
Sure. Beverly, can you share the meeting rules again? So just so we can do a little quick place setting for everyone.
Can you put the slides up, please?
Sure. Done.
And this like what we all need. We have to be mindful of each other's space and time today. We just want that you find a very quiet space so you can give us your best. And secondly, we would like for you to mute all your phones and devices.
Sorry, let me share the correct screen.
And then the last one will be if you all can also just use the chat room for questions, Q&A. We'll really appreciate that. So those are the meeting rules. Thank you, and we look forward to an insightful discussion this morning or this afternoon. Thank you.
All right, so I'll start off with introduction with R2R. R2R stands for Recover to Restore Sustainable Development Solutions. We're a small women-owned interdisciplinary consulting firm specializing in sustainability planning and technical assistance. This includes capacity development, community engagement, and natural resource management. And we seek to help our clients sustainable development goals in the US and also in sub-Saharan Africa. And at R2R, we're ensuring that social equity impact is what drives our work and us. And so the creation of R2R was inspired by Beverly and I's extensive travels across the US, Latin America, and West Africa. where we saw the disparity between marginalized and underserved communities and how women and children can be negatively impacted by the great threats of climate change, war and social crisis, and limited access to female resources. So we pitched the idea to Morgan Stanley, Sustainable Investment Challenge, as Recover to Restore in February 2023, so earlier this year. And although we didn't reach the finals for the challenge, we did receive favorable reviews from the judges who recognize the importance of this type of social impact work within post-conflict countries. And just to kick this off, we have this Beyond COP28 event. We all know that COP28 ended this week, and there's been a lot of buzz around this international event. There's a strong international consensus that we all must transition away from fossil fuel use. And COP28 sent a clear signal to the markets that renewables are the future and more investments will be made in this sector. So I hope today's conversation will get us thinking about what it takes and what it actually means to implement the multitude of agreements that's been set in place, that's been promised during the COP28 discussions, and how do we actively use the millions of dollars that's been committed to achieve these goals. So note COP28 covered a range of pressing environmental topics and issues. So today we are kicking off this Beyond COP28 series with a focus on energy industry and just transition. And you will see from our speakers, our panelists, with a wide range of experience in that in the energy industry and equity field. So I'm hoping we'll have a really good conversation today. So with that, I'm going to kick it back over to Martins to introduce our speakers really briefly, and then we can head into our discussion.
Before introducing our speakers, I'd rather we clearly understand what COP stands for, because it's important for the participants to get to understand the background behind what we are discussing today. COP simply stands for the what do you call it? Conference of Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And so when you talk about climate change, a lot of people seem not to understand that it is something that affects every individual across board. Climate change is not domiciled in the United States or in China or in Brazil, which are some of the countries with the highest, the greater percentage of emission responsible for what we're witnessing globally. But at the end of the day, year in, year out, people come together to talk about it. Politicians ride on that to get elected into political offices. And then at the end of the day, we have absolutely nothing to show for all those razzmatazz. So today, to help us discuss the outcome of the COP28 that held in Dubai, I would like Beverly to introduce properly our speakers for today's discourse. But it's essential to understand that each speaker has a limited time to talk about whatever he or she has been assigned to speak about, because at the end of the day, we'll have the question and answer session. Please, Beverly, could you introduce the first speaker?
Thank you. And our first speaker will be Dr. Kama Molwa. He's an expert in minerals, exploitation, mining, and data. And the next one follow will be Mr. Livingston R. Scott. He's the founder of Solar Vacation LCC. It's a local company based in North Carolina. And then we go on to Africa. We have Miss Lopu Game Blaki. She's gender and energy expert. We'll be talking, and also a chair at the University of Liberia. And then you also will have Miss Sharon Pace, who will be talking about peace and recovery. And then we will have our Honorable Steve Rao. He's a councilman, the town of Morrisville, and he's done a lot of innovative work around this space. So if Dr. Moba can please take the floor. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. Today I'm going to speak to you on the impact of mining activities on climate change and the environment. Climate change refers to long-term shift in temperature and weather patterns. Such shift can be natural due to changes in the sun's activity or large volcanic eruptions. But since the 1800s, human activity have been the main driver of climate change, primarily due to the burning of fossil fuel like coal, oil, and gas. Burning fossil fuel generates greenhouse gas emissions that act like a blanket wrapped around the earth, trapping the sun's heat and raising temperatures. Mining is a process of extracting useful material from the earth. Some examples of which are substances that at mine include gold, coal, or iron ore. Mining activity negatively impact the atmosphere, the flora and fauna in the area of operation and beyond. Mine operation, especially surface or open pit mines, have released toxic chemicals like cyanide into rivers and streams, creating hazardous living conditions for the people living in these environments. Fumes derived from machines, trucks, and other mining equipment, processing equipment have contributed to air pollution, contributing to the growing problem of climate change. To reduce or minimize these negative impacts, the following steps are suggested. Create a system or mechanism to collect and transmit data on carbon emissions from the various mines sensors. Via sensors from the various mining operation, we're going to use sensors. The sensors will be wirelessly transmitting the data to base stations located in data centers, housing a centralized database system. The climate change monitoring team operating within the data center will create an alert system to indicate when a set threshold has been reached. The centralized integrated database system should be financed by an independent international body or organization to remove undue influence from the power that be in a host country. With the needed funding, my company, Minerals Exploration, Mining, and Data Management Consultancy, Mendata in short, is available to synergize with any and all Liberia or local company interested in fighting climate change, an environmental issue in Liberia and West Africa. And proper land reclamation program to restore the land after it has been mined should be a priority. Data collection and interpretation. Data has become the mainstay of any and all meaningful work around the world. When a climate change and environmental data is obtained, it must be cleaned, processed, and analyzed for accurate interpretation. This is to avoid deriving conclusions from inaccurate data sets. These, along with the commitment of the recent project that has ended, I think the world is ready for a better environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so very much for that presentation. Can the next speaker take the floor? Sharon Page. Sharon Page, sorry.
Vincent, Mr. Vincent, please. If Vincent is not there, then we go to Lopu. Lopu, can you present, please? Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. So I'm going to be speaking to you. Good afternoon to all. And I'm going to be speaking to you on why equity is important in decision making around energy. So before we talk about why energy is important around financial decision making in the energy sector, let us first of all know what is gender equality, because that is what we are heading to. So when we look at gender equality, it's socially constructed roles that are expected of males and females in our society. And we also look at equity. When we talk about equity, we are talking about ensuring equal access to resources by male and female. We should ensure that they have equal access to resources. And equality is ensuring that they have equal opportunity as well. So we look at equal access and opportunity to financial resources around the energy sector, and how do we include equity perspective. So it is important to know that equitable distribution of resources leads to equality. Once we have equitable distribution of resources, we're going to have equality. We are specifically speaking to gender equality and inclusion, not leaving anyone out. In financial decision making, specifically speaking to gender equality and inclusion, the financial decision making around the energy sector is important. It is important to include both males and females and the most marginalized group of people, while considering the different needs of men and women, since energy plays an essential role in both men's and women's lives. Knowing that equity leads to equality, if we should work towards achieving gender equality in the field of energy or the energy sector, making financial decisions inclusive of males and females and disadvantaged group is important to social, environment, and economic development and growth. So how do we include equity perspective when it comes to gender? From a gender perspective, women and men have different energy needs. Hence, their energy needs should be identified and treated differently if we should include women and men or gender into energy perspective. However, our focus should not only be limited to including women and men, where they are only recipients for the usage of energy, where they are only consumers. If we want to talk about them consuming energy, we are trying to limit their ability. We should be thinking about how budgetary allocation can be made to financial decisions to support the increase of women capacity, through supporting them to benefit more from STEM courses and allowing them to become suppliers of energy rather than them becoming only consumers of energy. If we only allow them to be consumers of energy, we are still putting them in a marginalized position. But once we allow them to be suppliers of energy, we have to build their capacity and allow them to participate in the labor market that is so male dominant when it comes to the energy sector. With some of these strategies, we are sure of social, environment, and economic development. From the just ended COP28 review, we saw that a lot of finances have been allocated. But how can we also tap into this to show that sub-Saharan Africa, including West Africa, benefit from these finances that have been allocated? It means that we have to spend more time in empowering females in STEM courses, that they will benefit, their capacities will be built. And we also learned from COP that once we've empowered women in the sector, DPV will also reduce. So there are factors that are taken care of. And once we take care of these factors, we notice that other area of gender inequality is being taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lopi. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. We have next on our list now, Ms. Sharon Pace, the Executive Director of the Universal Peace Federation, North Carolina chapter. Is Sharon on ground?
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for all the speakers that are speaking on this important topic. I get to speak about peace, where I find great hope. And I first want to start that in the 70s and 80s, the late Dr. Sun Myung Moon did many, many conferences on the International Federation for the Unity of Sciences. So I believe that the greatest scientist in the world is our Heavenly Parent, our Creator, God. And He created everything around us in harmony and peace and love. And He wants us as stewards to take care of His creation. So, some of the things that universal peace really share about is interdependence, shared values, and mutual prosperity. And we can see that how we need to follow those three in the creation, like say suggested interdependence. Okay, our body, needs water, air, and sunlight, right, to exist, and we need give and take action in order to have relationships with people. If one person is just talking and there's no response, there isn't too much energy, right? And we see in the creation that everything in creation has a whatever you call that word, S word, a relationship with each other, that it gives us a chance to live. And also mutual prosperity, that we all are prospering. So when our environment is in peace and is in health, then also mankind is in health. When we follow science and we follow the logic of how to take care of the creation, then we also can learn also how to take care of each other. And shared values, universal shared values. Let's see, can't read my notes here, but it's like gravity, right? Gravity, we can't give up gravity, right? Gravity, it's a scientific law, but we need it, right? And there's scientific laws throughout the universe. So I would like to tell you, if you ever are interested, there's a wonderful newsletter that I go to. It's called The Earth and I. It's called Loving Nature and Healing the Earth. And the bottom line is, we have to, if we want to recover the earth, we have to recover ourselves. We have to learn mind and body unity and peace within ourselves. Because if we want to work with business owners and educators and people that might not have the same values as you, and how are we going to solve climate change, it's going to take a great mass of people to work together. With this creation, without this godly creation, we cannot exist. And I think people forget to realize how we need each other. We desperately need one another, and that we must become responsible stewards of the environment. And I'm really excited that I see more and more schools are having a garden in their school where children can learn about the environment. They can see that things don't come from the supermarket, but things come from, animals, cows, pigs, goats. Where does your milk come from? Where do products come from? And I see more and more in our families, we are starting to have gardens in our backyards where our children can see where all things come from. And we are starting to recycle more. So if we really want the environment, we have to become one with God's creation. He created all this around us because of joy, and He wants us to be in harmony with all things around us. So when we go see the Eiffel Tower, or we go see the pyramids in Egypt, or we go to Canada, and and we see the falls, Niagara Falls, we can see what a wonder it is. But can you imagine if we really have understanding of ourselves, and if we're really connected to our true selves and to God, how much more we could develop science, how much more we will be able to ease and bring the creation into oneness, and we will become one in heart and spirit. So I love the creation. I'm part Cherokee Indian, And when I go out there to meet God, you know, I can see great hope and great love in the creation. And I just wanted to put that in this talk today, that to really thank the earth, thank God for creating such beauty and harmony. And we need, like atoms and protons, all over our whole body, you know, we need each other. Thank you so much for inviting me. Have a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah. And I know there's something else at the end of December. I forgot. There's another also holiday, but peace and blessings, everyone. Thank you.
That will be New Year, perhaps. Thank you so very much, Sharon, for that wonderful presentation and your perspectives. I think our last speaker is available, and that's the founder of Solar Vacations LLC, Vincent Scott. If you are ready, we're yearning to hear your perspective too. Thank you. Vincent, can you unmute yourself, please?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Awesome. It's great to be a part of this esteemed panel, and I thank you all so much for inviting me. First, I want to say what a great opportunity to have so many people from throughout the African diaspora and throughout the world participating in this forum. And it's just a great honor to be able to have the opportunity to speak to those across the world all looking to have some level of sustainable development. With that said, I want to share with you guys today some information that I've come across and really give some perspective to overall what we may be all trying to accomplish. I've worked in the hotel industry for close to over 30 years. In fact, I've recently split off to start my own company, solarvacations.com here in the States. And I'd like to start this story by speaking about a gentleman that I met in one of the hotels that I worked for, working with Marriott and Ritz-Carlton, maybe about 15 years back. And I remember meeting this African gentleman, and we struck up an amazing conversation. He worked in the tech industry, and the conversation was awesome. And we got to the point where we started to talk about, I've always been interested in, and it's been a passion of mine, connecting those on the African continent with those here in the States. I've always felt that, guys, you probably won't believe it based on my size, but I always thought that I'd play in the NFL. All right. I thought I was going to be a national football. You couldn't tell me I was going to be a national football player. I was going to the NFL, and that's all I was going to do. God seemingly led me into a different direction. And even as a youth, when I would seemingly get in trouble or be at my wit's end, or how I even got into the hotel industry, I was a youth, let's just say not necessarily always doing the right thing. And I remember God saying to me one time, the last time I got in trouble, he said, "That's your last opportunity." I changed my life around. I entered into the hotel field, been there for close to 30 years of my life. And when I met this gentleman from Africa, it seemed as if I was able to kind of see the world in a unique way. A lot of people think that hotels are just big places where people come to lay on the beach and have a good time. But I can assure you what hotels are, they're convention spaces. And they're convention spaces where people get together to collate to rule the world. And when I met this young African, I started to, I was a little ignorant, and I started to talk about, hey, man, we need to get together, and we need to make sure that, people are here in the States and the brothers in Africa, that we're getting together, we're making sure we're coalescing. And it seemed as if his business idea did not coalesce with my business idea. His business idea was that he'd build a property that would more or less coalesce to a European market, but it seemed as if maybe he wasn't thinking about how he could help the average African get to where they want to get. And at first I had a level of, I would say I have a level of maybe say apprehension of why he felt that way. But as I started to grow and as I started to learn a little bit more about the subject matter, I started to understand why a young African might feel this way. So in many ways, guys, maybe we were going to be looking at this. I said, maybe I'm looking at this meeting from a point of view where maybe I'm looking at this from a 360-degree sky view. But maybe, guys, in reality, we should be looking at this from 1,000-point sky view, 1,000 miles in the sky looking down. And why is that so important? Guys, why is that so important? Why should we be looking at this from a higher level point of view? I want to show you something. I apologize, but I wanted to show you something. Why should we be looking at it from a higher view? I want to show you this here. It's the US dollar. Why is this dollar so important and why does it even mean anything, right? Well, imagine if you took this dollar, and right now I live in the state of South Carolina. And imagine if I took this dollar and I wanted to go to North Carolina to take my family on a vacation or maybe purchase some goods for my business. But imagine when I got to the North Carolina border, which is just 45 minutes north of here, I would need a visa to cross over to that border. I would also need to exchange this dollar for whatever the local currency in North Carolina would be versus here in South Carolina. And imagine, not only would I need a visa and I need to transfer the currency, but I would also have a checkpoint or border once I got to that North Carolina border. Now, let me ask you guys a very important question. If we adopted that system tomorrow, okay, because now if I take this dollar across North Carolina or if I take this dollar to California, it's the same dollar. Am I correct? Imagine what would happen to the United States economy tomorrow if I took this dollar and we changed over to that system. And on top of that, when I get this dollar to that North Carolina border, that exchange rate for that dollar is being decided by Canada or being decided by Mexico, a completely other country, completely different entity. Well, see, that's the issue we have in Africa now. 54 countries, 54 dictators, 54 different dollars doing 54 different things. So what would happen to the American economy tomorrow if we adopted that system? I'm pretty sure you guys know that this dollar would crash very fast. So in many ways, guys, I beg the question, are we talking sustainable projects? Or are we just talking sustainability? Because I can assure you, if we continue to operate with 54 different currencies, 54 different presidents, 54 different voices, okay, then you're not going to have a sustainable environment, okay? Do you know how the roads get fixed here? Do you know how the commerce moves here? Well, you know, in many ways, when a road breaks down or it needs to be fixed, right? I hear about all the time my friends in Nigeria talking about a road comes in, it gets fixed, and then there's no maintenance. Well, what happens is when you don't create an environment or a sustainable environment where people can earn a living, you can then tax that base in your local community, and then they can come back and provide jobs that can build roads that are sustainable. So I can assure you guys that also the rest of the world knows this. And I'll share with you something that probably no other ears have heard outside of what I'm about to say right now.
Sorry, Love Vicent, you need to start wrapping up because we have other speakers and then we have the Q&A as well. Thank you.
You got it. So when wrapping things up, we're basically talking about sustainable environments and how we can sustain build an environment. Because when CEOs think about doing business on another continent, they're going to think about profits. They're going to think about shareholders. They're going to think about all of those different things. And if we come in and we have not created the environment by which they can do business, then we're talking about sustainability projects, but those CEOs in many ways look at those as vanity projects because what? I have to answer to shareholders. I have to answer to those that are my constituents. So I have to make sure that that is a project that is sustainable, that I can bring to my people. If not, I'd rather just give you a vanity project. So I'm just going to close in saying this. You guys maybe need to look at a book called by John Perkins called Confessions of an Economic Hitman, where he talks about coming into Africa. What a lot of companies do is they come into Africa and they use all of the resources to help themselves take the money out of the country and then come back and say, you guys are in trouble. So we're going to have to, give you a loan through the IMF. But you know what? That IMF loan don't look like you're paying it back in time. So we're going to need help at the UN. We're going to need help with taking some of your natural resources. But but when the average African child wakes up in the morning, they're going to get an education for what? They need to be getting an education for the new Africa. They need a sustainable tax base to bring in that money so that they get a quality education, because I'm sure Africans aren't educating their children to get an education in Europe. They want to be able to have something right there. And with that said, guys, I'll close by saying I met a gentleman that worked in the United States Army in the military. And this is very important for you all to hear. We spoke one day and I said, hey, I have a lot of ideas that can help change the conditions that we're currently operating under. And he said, don't tell it to him. Don't say it to society. I said, why is that? He said, I walked into the Pentagon, and the gentleman must remain anonymous, but we're close friends to this day. But he said, I walked into the Pentagon in 1978. He said, a former top military officer walked out of the office and he had a top secret document that he left on his desk. He said, I picked up that document and it was a UN document. And he said, you know what that document said? He said that document said no Africans here in the United States, meaning the Black race here in the United States, are to coalesce or to get together for the sake of growing and developing businesses. And certainly no Africans between the United States and Africa are to get together for economic development and growth. So that means to separate and divide. So in many ways, what I'm saying is he said this was a UN document. So if you look at what's happened whenever the US uses the UN to go in and do things like that, you understand how the connections connect. And by working in hotels, God was able to show me and meet these people. And I'll close by saying this. I don't mean to hold you guys up. These are very important. I'll close by saying this. What's the solution? Right? Because I always tell my son.
The solution we are going to find, hopefully, by the end of this interaction. Thank you so much, Ella Vincent, Scott, for that wonderful presentation. We have someone from the town of Millersville in North Carolina. Councilman Steve Rohr, if you're on ground, I would like you to chime in here. Morrisville, sorry.
Councilmember Steve Rao, served in the City Council of Morrisville for 13 years, Mayor Pro Tem for 3, and Beverly Eckerson is one of our most engaged residents. I want to thank her for her invitation. I want to thank Chair Pace for being here. And Fanny, thank you for organizing this as well. I'll be very brief. What I've been asked to do is share a perspective with you as a local government official that's very involved in innovation, particularly as it relates to the Internet of Things, smart cities, connected communities, and I'm also a commentator on PBS TV and WPTF. So I have to read a lot. And one book that really changed my perspective was Bill Gates' book on how to prevent a climate disaster. As a city council member for many years, when they use the word sustainability, you know, I would just think about recycling. And really Bill Gates, or solar, but Bill Gates's book really brought forward this idea that the government alone cannot help us drive our carbon net zero goals. It's going to be innovation and technology. And in fact, one of his investments is in Morrisville, a Morrisville-based company called Sustera, which is actually using carbon capture technology. And Gates went on even on Fareed Zakaria to talk about plant-based meats and, you know, the Internet of Things and connected devices and solar and renewables, and how all of this through collaboration, which is the key word I want to emphasize, collaboration between academia, between industry, between government, local governments, to actually drive our net zero emissions. So let me just give you a couple of examples before I leave with you today. First of all, I want to give out the Clean Tech Cluster Awards was a perfect example, which was held at SAS, the largest privately held software company in the world, which is headquartered in Cary, North Carolina. And at this conference, it brought together great entrepreneurs, great innovators at the local government level that were really doing really good stuff with carbon reduction strategies and renewable energy strategies. And one of those was a group called Solarize the Triangle, which I really want to highlight Kimberly Conley, who's our sustainability manager in Morrisville, and our team in Morrisville. We have one of the best staffs in the world. They partnered with Solarize the Triangle, which basically has signed 291 contracts, yielding $488,000 of energy cost reductions and 5 million pounds of carbon dioxide reduction yearly. And the town of Morrisville signed an agreement with Solarize the Triangle for our residents to incentivize them to have more solar panels. And so that's a perfect example. They won the local government clean tech innovation award for the year. And it's just a perfect example of, you know, at the town, local government officials, you know, we can educate people about stormwater. We can educate people about recycling at a green day. We can educate people about Solarize the Triangle. All of these things can be what we can do as local government officials. And I'll end with this. Our Commerce Secretary, Michelle Sanders, ended the Clean Tech Cluster Awards talking about how North Carolina has really emerged as a destination for clean tech investment, whether it's VinFast, Speed, lithium battery manufacturing coming into Morrisville, creating 200 jobs and 165 million Forge Nano of investment. So North Carolina is really on its way of recruiting these kinds of clean tech innovation as well. So I'll end with that. I just want to thank each and every one of you for inviting me to share your perspective. And what I would ask is if you have ideas to share with our Mayor, TJ Colley, who's very passionate about these issues as well, or our council or our staff, please don't hesitate to reach out, because we want to make sure that we're leveraging best minds in our environment, our sustainable ecosystem, so that we, as I always say, can develop a sustainable innovation playbook. And this is a playbook that we have to write every day so that we can get to net zero, working with our governor and our elected officials across this great state and nation. So on that note, sorry, I had to get a lot in because my time got condensed, but hope that was informative for you. Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa, and God bless each and every one of you. And let's continue to work together to write the plays, to score touchdowns, which is, in my opinion, net zero carbon emissions. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Steve, for that excellent presentation. You nipped it in the bud, and that's focusing essentially on what we need to do to reduce carbon monoxide emission. The issue of climate change, like I mentioned in the beginning, is something that affects each and every one of us. And for as long as we continue to live in denial, unfortunately, it's become an issue that has been so politicized along party lines across the world, with some people calling it a hoax, when, as a matter of fact, if you look around us with all this stuff happening, global warming, bringing about, what do you call it, ocean surge. You see the Arctic is almost disappearing, all the ice melting away. And at the end of the day, where do all those end up? And that's why you have the massive flooding and all that have been going on around the world. So Thank you so very much. I'm going to be handing over to Fanny and Beverly to coordinate the Q&A session. But before I do that, I'm just going to drop a question for our speakers today. And my question is going to be focused on the agreement just reached at the end of the COP28 on the use of fossil fuel. Now we're looking at stopping that across the world. And that takes me to the presentation by La Vincent that talked about how Africa has greatly been impacted by global politics. Now, at the end of the day, we're still looking at Africa for the provision of stuff like minerals like cobalt, copper, that essentially are going to be very important in our migrating from fossil fuel to more renewable energy. So my question will be, what do you think the impact will be on the continent of Africa? What measures are we putting in place to safeguard the environment as we get into the extraction of these other minerals, like cobalt, like I said, and copper? Because at the end of the day, we might still find that Africa becomes a dumping ground or the continent that will suffer the most from the impact of whatever switch we are making in terms of renewable energy. If you look around the world, the West, namely the United States, European Union, Brazil, and China account for at least 80% of the global emission that has impacted negatively our environment. So what are we doing to ensure that Africa, again, does not end up suffering the impact of the mismanagement of the West? So I hand over to Fanny and Beverly to coordinate the Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Martins. I also just want to say thank you to all of our speakers. Such great perspectives, and especially following COP28. In the end, you know, this is an interdisciplinary issue, the environmental crisis. It impacts all of us in many, many different ways. So it's great to be able to hear about the equity and gender side of things, the business politics side of things, the mining industry part as well. And I just want to say really quickly before we do Q&A, I do want to introduce Joel Christoph. He was with Beverly and I when we were doing the Morgan Stanley Investment Challenge, and he's also currently on the call. He is currently a director of effective thesis and economics PhD researcher at the European University Institute. And his professional experience encompasses economics, governance, energy, and policy research. And he's collaborated with organizations like the World Bank, the IEA, Energy Aspects, and the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. So I don't know if he wants to say a couple words, and also that would allow our speakers and anyone else on the call as well to mull over Martin's question about, you know, how do we see the transition, this energy transition, in the comparison of like oil and the gas sector as well?
Go ahead. Sorry, Martin. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I'll just jump in to say that I've been working with Fanny and Beverly for quite a long time, and I want to congratulate them on a lot of the work they've done in taking initiative. So yeah, congratulations, and I look forward to the discussion.
I want to end with a final thought because I have to take off if I could. I think one of the things that we have to look at is what I call a sustainable energy transition strategy. So I think the challenge is that still so much of our electricity and power comes from fossil fuels. So I think we have to wean our dependence off of fossil fuels while the cost of renewables comes down. And it's kind of a hard transition, right? And I think that you know, with globally what's going on with the wars in Ukraine and much of this about oil and energy, I think we've got to do certain things, like, for example, nuclear power could be one way where we could actually transition to clean energy. Also converting coal to natural gas could be another way of doing it. So while we're talking about renewables, I think this kind of transition is going to be important for the president of the United States, for the leaders of our world, so that we can wean our way off of fossil fuels, because I think that's something we often don't talk about. I'm from West Virginia, which is the coal state of the nation. But even on 60 Minutes, they had the governor of Wyoming talking about how they're doing a lot of stuff of coal conversions, which I think is important. So I just wanted to end with that point. I've got to run. I've got to catch a flight. But I wanted to thank you all for inviting me, and whatever I can do to share these ideas, and would encourage you to reach out to me so we can get you on North Carolina TV and radio. Shout out to the best staff in the world, the town of Morrisville. I know some of them are on the call. And I want to appreciate you all for giving me the time to give one last shout out. I'm sorry. It's hard to keep a politician quiet. So I'll go. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
All right. So now we enter the Q&A portion. And so I think if any of the speakers want to take a stab at Martin's initial question to get us to kick us off, that'd be great. Don't be shy.
I'll go first. First of all, what everybody's doing right now is so important. You're laying the foundation, the groundwork, for conversation. And I personally believe Africa will be #1 in the future. I did a conference in 2019 with Beverly Yakuson. And, in Africa, you're having more children. In America, we're having less children. You have the greatest resources, but the problem, I believe, is self-centeredness. So we gotta work with people. Their motivation is to raise up Africa, to make Africa great, a win-win situation where all people can win, where the people can have jobs in Africa, where the environment and the minerals can be used not only for Africa, but for everywhere. So we need to get out of ourselves and put our egos aside and work together. I loved what Steve said, collaboration, business, media, scientists, religious leaders, everybody working together. But we need to get out of ourselves to work in harmony. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. I see Dr. Kamati Malaba has his hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. Talking about fossil fuel for the mining sector. In the open pit mine, we have what we call haul pack, Caterpillar, dozers, name it. They all use fossil fuel, either diesel or gas. So to solve that problem in the mines, we replace them with electric capability, electric cars. And that will cut down the consumption of fossil fuel in those hauling equipment, shovels. And it may not look obvious to you, but they use a lot. So that's one way to convert those to electrical equipment. And then we'll cut down all of those things. And then we can also look at it, the concentrator, the washing plant, and see how we can replace what they use with electricity, so that we have almost zero emission or consumption from the mining sector. That's one way. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to come in, and Joe, you can come. And one of the things, Dr. Malwa, you raised, it's not even the mining sector, but even in local communities that are on a staff. The transportation sector is one of those sectors, but by 2050, we have to decarbonize the fleet. And one of the things that we've been struggling with is to see how you categorize the different vehicles from light duty in-plug electric vehicles to middle and heavy electric cars. So even in local communities, we also struggle. But one of the things I love about Joey has this amazing expertise of he can actually benchmark those emission factors. So if Joey, can you come in and tell us some of the work that you've also done as far as capturing CO2 and decarbonizing the transportation sector?
I don't think Joel is here anymore. Oh, you're on mute, Beverly.
So one of the things with that sector is, you know, that by 2050, a lot of countries will want to decarbonize because the energy sector actually contributes to a lot. So according to like Natural Lab said that at least 76% of miles traveled from electric will be projected as we need about 447,000 plugs. And then you have like 10 million non-residential L2 plugs for light vehicles. So for me, I think the transportation sector also play a very important role, how we start looking how to decarbonize that sector.
Thanks, Beverly. I think that's, the point of recognizing how hard we are relying on oil and gas sector right now. It also plays into the difficulty of a transition. And now we're adding in an element of equity of a just transition. And that was a centerpiece in the COP28 discussions. So they've talked a lot about ensuring net zero transition or near net zero, trying to reduce the objectives of like emission reductions, affordability, reliability, and industrial competitiveness. So I want to pose the question to the group. So how can we ensure that these goals are adhered to when we're implementing actual on the ground energy projects or energy transition projects? Does anyone know of any successful examples? It could even be in your own work or in the research that you're doing. Yes, please go ahead.
Well, oh, am I the one? Sure, go ahead.
Go ahead,
Oh,
Dr.
Steve is okay. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Steve Yekison, and I'm glad to be on this platform and like to say thanks again to Beverly and Fanny. I'm sorry. So I've listened quite keenly to some of what you've said, and I've spent some time thinking about some of these concepts. So even though a lot of it is not yet in the implementation stage, we have thought about it. We have researched some of these concepts, and so I'll give you an example. For example, with Liberia, from where I come from, Liberia, West Africa. One of the speakers talked about modeling, sustainable modeling, and the fact that you have 50 plus nations, which if you parallel that to the US, they will all be part of a union, and the benefits of a union versus each country being individual, and disadvantages of that. What I can say is yes, that's a disadvantage, and that's clearly an unsustainable model. But we now have steps towards uniting some of the bigger issues and projects, either under the AU, which is the African Union. We're moving towards a single currency. You have efforts also around regional corporations. So, for example, we have the West African Association of West African States, ECOWAS. And then you have a smaller regional body called the Mana River Union, which is a regional body of about three countries, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and the Ivory Coast. They've been able to do what's called the West African Power Pool, where they've pooled a significant amount of their capacity, energy capacity, and which includes, greatly includes hydro, which has far less emissions, and we're aggressively looking at developing other hydro capacity that would tie into this. So a lot of these projects, as I stated, modeling would be key. You might not, one country in itself may not have the economies of scale relative to making a particular project sustainable from a business perspective. But if you put 2 or 3 different markets together, like what we're doing, you would have that. Another significant consideration is the fact that Liberia has a significant amount of forest, and we are being aggressively pursued across the globe by players in the carbon trade market to see how best we can collateralize this opportunity. And one of the things that I would like to puffer, for example, is if we could, for example, trade our carbon credits for, say, a fleet of 100, 200 transportation buses to take care of our public transportation needs. So that was one of the projects that came to mind that will substantially reduce our operating costs by over 50%, because a lot of our buses that we use now are basically powered by diesel. So you would be hitting two different goals here. But I'll stop here because Beverly keeps. So yes, I'll stop here. Thanks.
Thank you. I have one question in the chat, and it's by Emily Odonzi, if I'm pronouncing it well. She said, I believe educating the local/affected communities and involving them in the processes is essential for successful transition of any kind. And we do agree with that. Thank you for sharing.
And I just want to be respectful of the time. Is this 3 minutes after the hour? So if folks need to jump off, I understand. But obviously this is a very dense conversation, right? Like, I think we can continue talking about this for a whole day. So I think before we do a wrap up, I do want to allow Dr. Laba to have, a moment of his time to be able to speak. And then after that, we should be wrapping up.
Yeah, thank you. Just briefly, carbon emission control must not be left with the host country. Independent group should set up sensors in high pollution areas like factories. These sensors will react to set threshold to alert monitoring group in real time when violations take place. So that could be a beginning of carbon control in highly polluted areas. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, everyone. Just want to have a big thank you for everyone who showed up today to engage in this super riveting and deep conversation. I think we've barely just scratched the surface, actually. And many of these conversations will continue to be had as you know, as we slowly move away from what has been happening at COP28. And as the money continues to flow into these projects, they're going to be hard questions to be asked about how projects are going to actually be implemented, while considering all of the things that we've talked about. So again, I want to thank all the speakers for joining us today. And then of course, everyone else who has joined us today as well. Really appreciate your time. And we hope to have more of these types of conversations in the future. And they're probably going to cover a whole range of environmental issues. Aside from just energy transition, there's so much to be done, so much to be said. And I don't know if Beverly, if you want to say a couple of words before we head out.
No, I just say thank you and we look forward to more discussion as we move towards net zero. Thank you all.
Right. Thanks, everyone.
All right, thank you, everyone. This interaction was being live on YouTube, and I did share the link. So before you sign out, you might want to copy it. I'll share it one more time. But it's been a wonderful engagement with each and every one of you. Thank you so very much. My name remains Martin Sobu. See you soon. And bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.